Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm so excited you're able to join us. Today we have, in my humble opinion, just a living legend with us, Roger Lamb. He is just going to make sure I have this correct. Right now he resides in Boston. He is the founder of Disciples Today, which helps to connect our family of churches. And he's also currently part of the ICOC Communications Service Team. So I really wanted to have Roger on today because of everything that's going on in the world. I think communication is vital. So we're kind of, quote, killing two birds with one stone, which is to learn more about Roger, but also to perhaps improve our communication skills. So first question I have for Mr. Roger is, can you share about how you became a disciple?
Well, let me thank you for having me on, and thank you for having these special moments here of capturing our history and just letting us communicate with this incredible tool. That's a great question, and I really love telling the story. Just an abbreviated version, I grew up in the mainline churches of Christ. My mom and dad were both members. My mom actually became a Christian when I was 4. And but then I found out later my great-grandfather was a circuit preacher in the Churches of Christ in Illinois from the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. And so anyway, I grew up with some really, really great Bible teaching. My mom read the Bible to me every morning and just lived out Jesus. I mean, she took me to visit orphans and widows and nursing homes, and had some great teachers that really got to learn the Bible at church, and it was a great experience. So when I was going to college, I wanted to go to a Christian college so I could find a good Christian girl to marry, and I went to Harding University in Searcy, Arkansas. Had to look it up on a map. I'd never been there, but it had a great reputation, and some of their students had stayed with us on a choir trip. But I studied, got degrees in math and English and stuff. But I started preaching when I was in college, my last 2 years. I preached for a church every Sunday and Wednesday night. And because that was my passion, and went on missions every summer for the whole summer. We'd go mostly to the Northeast. We'd knock doors 6 days a week, asking people if they wanted to study the Bible. And Marcia was on all of those campaigns as well. The last year we were married on that campaign. Then I went into the youth ministry in Houston for 4 years. I went from this really poor church in Arkansas to this wealthy church in Houston with 200 junior and senior high school kids. And then what caught my heart was an appeal for a little church in the middle of Illinois to have a preacher. They hadn't had one in many years. And for some reason, I'll never forget the moment in that meeting, raising my hand, say, I want to do that. And all the people looked at me like, are you crazy? Because they had like 60 members, but they just built a new building on the edge of campus. So we moved there with a 1-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old, and then started the campus ministry. We got students coming. It grew to 120, but it wasn't what it should be, and I wasn't happy. And I kept going to all these conferences to figure out how do you really grow the church the way it did in the first century. And then finally I thought, well, we need a campus minister. So I'd been reading the Crossroads Bulletin, and I called up Chuck Lucas. I said, I raised the money, I need a campus minister. We interviewed a few people and hired Kip McKean to be our campus minister. And boy, that changed the church. It changed me, changed our family. It was awesome. Because all the stuff I'd been reading in Crossroads, and then I'd gone down and visited, I saw more New Testament Christianity. So he came and, well, he wasn't there long. And I went, you know, the reason I'm not happy is I'm not totally committed to God. I'm serving full time and I'm the preacher and all that. And at the end of a retreat we had, and Chuck and Ann Lucas came up, and Elena, Kip and Elena weren't married at the time. They were getting married that December. At the end of the retreat, had the final sermon, and I was supposed to, bring it all home. I remember being so convicted on the front pew. I just put my sermon notes in the back of my Bible, and I got up and I said, I have a confession to make. So there's three kinds of Christians. There's the kind that really are serious. They're really totally committed to Jesus. There's the kind that say they are, but they're not, and they're lukewarm. And then there's the kind that just don't even try at all. And I said, your preacher has been the second kind. That's who I've been. And I'm repenting right now. I'm going to be the first kind. And I want you to help me do that. And I want to challenge all of you to do the same thing. And that was my turning point right there in terms of really making a decision to be a disciple of Jesus at that point. Marcia then followed a few months later. She didn't believe she could do it. And then she saw God would allow her to do that. And so that was, that was just my conversion point. Later, we restudied baptism because we used to not question anybody's baptism at all. And I started questioning mine and studied it with Al Baird and some people, and then I was baptized later as a result of that. So that's my story, a little mixed up, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. We'll have to unpack that more one day. Okay, next question is, I know you were in Chicago for some time, and I know you were co-leading the church for a little bit there, but what would you say was your most memorable time during the early days of the Chicago church?
So many. We were in Charleston. Kip went on to Boston to get that started. We planted a church in Champaign, and then were called up to help in Chicago. We had a Midwest evangelism seminar where there were about 10 campus ministries in the Midwest that we were coordinating and helping. We used the seminar to help unify us. And the Fuquays had planted the church in Chicago, and it was growing. It grew to like 600, and it just was amazing. But they needed help with a little more mature leadership, so they asked us to come. Marty and I were co-evangelists there for 3 years, from 1985 to 1988. The thing that, the many, many moments, one of the neatest ones was we had moved into this building called the Medina Auditorium. It was a Shriners building right downtown Chicago. And we moved in, we had 600 people. And in a couple of years, we had 1,500 people. And then at the seminar, we had 4,000 people fill that building, 3 levels, huge stage in the middle, seats surrounding, the singing, the worship, the faith was just awesome. But what really, really strikes me about that was, and I've thought about this a lot, in the 80s, I think we just had a raw faith. We just really believed God could do anything, and that we should, go anywhere, do anything, give up everything, and God would take care of us. And then we acted on it. The second part to that raw faith was humility. We knew we didn't know what we were doing, and we had to rely on God. We're like, how do you grow a church? How do you plant a church? I don't know. We just figured it out with God's help. How do you grow a church in the city of Chicago? I don't know. God showed us the way to do it. So I think that that's a really imprinted on my heart, that the raw faith and humility. I'm afraid in the 90s, we tried to keep the faith and lost the humility. And then I think God got our attention, said, remember me? Uh, and so the humility to me is way back from where it more like it used to be.
No, that's a great memory. I think, going from a small group to seeing it at 600 and then 1,500 and having a seminar of 4,000, I think is great. And just knowing that it's not just the numbers, but just the hearts that are being impacted.
Oh, the lives have changed. So amazing. And a lot of those people are all over the U.S., around the world now.
Yeah. And actually, right before this call, I was in a conversation with a good friend of mine, Clifton Brent, and he was actually in the Champagne Church. So I think he actually got baptized, I think, right after you had left. So the impact definitely just continues. So one of the things that I've noticed as I've learned more about you is just your passion to communicate and make sure that, our families and churches are communicating and so forth. Where would you say that comes from? Because I think everyone wants to communicate, but I think yours is on, another level. So where would you say that comes from?
Thank you. I've always enjoyed communications, in writing or speaking or whatever. But deeper than that, I grew up in Colorado Springs, Denver. I was born in Denver. Then my dad was stationed in Colorado Springs. We got to live there for 9 years. At one point, very formative stage of my life, before we moved to Germany in high school. But I'll never forget, in that small town, there were 4 or 5 churches of Christ that didn't have much to do with each other. One of them was predominantly African American. The others were predominantly Caucasian. But somebody started a radical thing, and it was once a month we'd get together and have a singing. And that was radical unity for the time. And then I'll never forget being at that, going, why are we just all together? It's a little town. Why do we have all these groups? And then the more I got to know about the history and the Restoration movement, and looking around and getting older and understanding things, and then going to Harding and seeing a lot of our history and studying our history, studying church history in college for 2 semesters. And then my great-grandpa, I was able to get his books, which were first edition books from the 1800s and early 1900s. And some of that was like, what in the world? And I was like, there's so many good things, but this is not what Jesus prayed for in John 17. And I knew that communications was huge in terms of keeping people unified. So I think that seeing that division and the bad communication, how that divided people, I think that gave me a real passion to have communication done right and done well to unify people.
Amen. Nothing like getting something really practical in a small setting like a small town or city to see the importance of communication. So that's awesome. Yeah. So starting with the Armed Forces Radio and Television Network in the 60s, up until today, you've consistently been in positions that require skillful communication. So in your experience, what do you feel are some of the keys to great communication?
Thank you for reminding me of my first real job. I was a junior in high school, started off cleaning the floors, and then wound up being the announcer and running camera and doing all that at that station. That really opened my eyes too there. I think, that to preaching, to writing and publishing and different things, seeing the impact, I thought a lot about this. And I just recently was asked to do a message for the Global Communications Day on communications. And so much of this that I've distilled, that I've learned, is in that message. It's on our Disciples Today ICOC YouTube channel, actually in several languages and several subtitles. But the keys to me are these two things. Number one, God is the greatest communicator of all time. And all the lengths he's gone to communicate to us. I remember when it finally dawned on me, what was creation? It was communication to us. Romans says we can see God in the creation. What were the prophets sent? He was communicating his message. What about the scriptures? That's written communication, ultimate communication. Jesus comes from heaven to show us who God is. That's a visual aid, the ultimate. So he's the greatest communicator, but he's also the greatest connector. There is no deeper connection, I truly believe, than true followers of Jesus really loving one another and being bonded by the blood of Jesus and by the love of Jesus. So God being the greatest communicator, greatest connector, there's two results of that. One is that, excuse me, one is that our connection communicates. Jesus said the two greatest commandments: love God, love each other. He said, by your love will all men know you're my disciples. So our connection communicates Jesus to the world, but also our communication connects each other. So we have to communicate in order to connect. And so we need to take advantage of whatever tools we can get to be able to be well connected in a right way. Communication tools are not good or evil. They're inanimate. It's what people do with them that makes them good or evil. I often to compare it to a hammer. You can build a house or you can kill somebody with it. So what do you do with Facebook? What do you do with Twitter? What do you do with bulletins, messages, YouTube, blogs? What do you do with them? That's up to us. But we should be more excited about using these tools to get the message of God out than the world is to destroy.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I definitely, as I've been learning a little bit more about just your life story, one of the things I'm very impressed with is how at each stage you figured out the technology and what you needed to learn to really be able to communicate. I think you mentioned when there was a need for a magazine, they said, go figure it out. And you just said, okay. And you learned what you needed to do to make sure the communication was there. So that is definitely awesome. And I think that skill is particularly important right now, where perhaps people have been preachers for many years or just general disciples for many years and have been used to communicating one way. And now we're learning a different way that we need to communicate. So a question I have for you is, what are some effective ways you have seen our churches communicating in these challenging times? And I think one of the ones that I had seen that you noted was that the Beirut church was able to plant a church in another country online. So I don't know if you can talk about that and just, in general, some different ways you've seen our churches communicating in a really effective way in this difficult time.
Yes, I love that story because it illustrates really what God has given us is a tremendous tool these days. The disciples in Beirut have been very technically proficient, and somehow they came in contact with somebody in one of these really tight Middle East countries who wanted to know more about God. So they studied the Bible with them. I think there was a couple, if I remember, and they studied with them over the internet. And then they flew them to Beirut to really meet them, talk to them, and be sure their convictions were there, and then baptize them. And then they talked to them about building a church, sharing their faith, and sent them home. And they discipled them over the internet. And that they've converted, I don't remember how many people now. I want to say 20. But they now, that church was planted through the web. You probably know there's hardly a church around that hasn't had somebody come to church by finding the church on the web.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's amazing. I think people are looking for God more now than they have been in decades.
Mm-hmm.
I think God's probably hearing from more people now than he's heard from in a long time. And I think it's up to us then to try to find those people looking for God and try to connect them with God through disciples, through the scriptures. And we have all these tools now that are, we're able to do.
Yeah, I think you also mentioned, if I remember, you mentioned there was a conference that was able to bring together, I think, 1,300 disciples from 87 countries to teach them about technology. So there definitely is a lot going on that I think has really helped our churches to kind of transition to the new normal.
Yeah, that was a watershed moment for us, I think. I'm very grateful to Kayla Haley in Denver, a Kingdom kid, owns her own social media and video production company. And she came up with the idea, said she wanted to partner with us to get this done. So in a week, we put together this 2-day conference. This is right when everything was happening in March. And the pandemic was becoming the reality. And we were shutting down, not being able to go to church together. And so we had what we called the quarantine church con.
Yeah.
And there over 1,300 people attended from 87 countries. And we had classes going on simultaneously, question and answer sessions about how do you do a live stream? How do you do kids worship? How do you do this? How do you do that? How do you use technology now in this new environment? And I think it just helped people get them the tools and the relationships. Built a lot of relationships there that continued, where people could get mentors, get advice, and get going. So we had some people who are very proficient at it, and then some people that are just starting from scratch. One of the great things too that happened there, one of the ministers I've known for a long time, he said, "Okay, I have a confession to make." During the conference, he said, "I've been the one holding us back from using the internet because I was afraid of it." And he said, "I was wrong. We've got to see this as a tool that God's given us to meet the people, reach them around me." And I think, there's so many boomers now who've become Zoomers. And there's so many older folks who are scared of all this. And now they're, yeah, okay, let's go to a meeting. And let's use it for this. Let's use it for that. And these virtual choirs that our churches have put together, which take tons of hours of work and expertise, are just beautiful. We put together a whole ICOC worship playlist on our YouTube channel, where you can go see some of the best of those virtual choirs, and then some other socially distant filmed songs that are just gorgeous. So I love the creativity, but it's driven by the passion and the purpose that disciples have. They're just looking for ways to express that.
That's awesome. So as we wrap it up, I do have a couple more questions. The first is, I know you've been around definitely for many years, from, reading, I think, your father's or grandfather's notes from the 1800s, to putting your notes down when you were giving a lesson to close out, your time there, and just saying, hey, I need to be, Christian number 2. I need to be totally committed, so to speak, and be totally faithful, to going through the challenges our churches went through to now coronavirus. So I think you've seen so many gyrations. But what would you say the greatest need is for our churches?
That is a great question, and I'm sure you can get a lot of different answers. But in my own personal opinion, the greatest need is next generation leadership. You know, I did a word study on generation to generation, and then another one just on generation in the Bible. It's a great eye-opening thing. God's been interested in this since Adam and Eve. And he says it all through the scriptures. And we come down to Paul and Timothy, you know, on and on. But I think that's the biggest need. The teen devotional today that they had, the International Teen Devotional, it was held this morning, our time. One of the brothers shared that, you know, we have a campus service team and a youth and family service team. He said about 60% of the members of those two service teams are kingdom kids that grew up in the church. I was like, yes. You don't want 100% because we're not reaching anybody then, but you definitely want it generation to generation. And that just meant so much to me. The thing that I think it's growing, I think there are people really wanting to do that. I think we need more young people wanting to go in the ministry and being willing to go anywhere, do anything, give up everything. And I just would make it, I think we got to go back to the raw faith with the humility. We don't know everything. We know what we know. We're going to rely on God to tell us the rest and to show us how to do it. And then just go, enjoy, go in faith. And God does amazing things with that.
Mm-hmm. So I know right now you reside in Boston, and I actually did live there for a little bit. I was, I don't know if you recall Brad Bynum. He was an elder.
Yes.
So I was in his sector. I think Jimmy Rogers, I want to say, was also, I think, overseeing the group. So I know obviously you live in Boston right now. You were there many years ago. This is kind of a two-part question. So what do you love about Boston? And outside of Boston, what would you say is your favorite city and why?
That is a huge question. I get asked that a lot. Well, Boston means a lot to us personally. You know, when my wife got cancer and we had to step back from the full-time ministry, we were leading that big church with a few Fuquays and all those churches in the Midwest. Boston pulled us in, took care of us, and helped us get going. And then when I had to step out of the ministry because of her health, that's when they said, why don't you do the magazine? So they really gave me my second career because I had preached already by that time, I think 23 years. And now I've been doing this since 1990. But I'm just old, you know. So emotionally, it means a lot. When we came up with the idea for KNN, they said, we'll go to LA and do that. So we were there for 10 years. And then the crisis happened. We moved back to Chicago for 8 years. Then we moved here because all of our kids had gravitated back to New England. And now our son, Michael, is our region leader here in Boston. And our grandkids are here and our incredible daughter-in-law. So those mean a lot to us, obviously. Our other two children actually have passed in the last 6 years since we moved back. So it's just been the love and the care here has just been great for us. We feel very loved, very cared for. In terms of the city, it's such a beautiful city. It's not your cookie cutter suburb type deal. Anywhere you go, it's just gorgeous. And New England is just beautiful. So we love that. In terms of another city, we've lived all over the United States. And there's something special about everywhere. And then I've been able to visit 40 countries. I would love to tell you the special thing about each country and each place, because God put beauty in each one of those places in a different way. Just what I would have to say, I'm going to not really answer your question directly. I'm going to give you a rundown. I love Chicago's downtown. That's my favorite downtown anywhere. I love Cape Town's stunning beauty. I love Rome and Athens for the culture, history, and the people. I love Jerusalem for the connection to the scriptures and to God. I love the weather in San Diego and Hawaii. Who can argue with Hawaii? And then Colorado Springs had a real great impact on me. But the growing up there in Colorado, the mountains, that's my go-to place. That's where I just love to go and feel close to God. So sorry if I overextended your answer.
Not a problem. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for your service for so many years. I think your decision to, well, first of all, your grandparents, right? Their faith that they were able to, pass on to you, almost like, Lewis, Eunice, Timothy, in the book of Timothy. But also, yourself putting your notes down and just being open and honest about where you were at many years ago, I think has led to, so many great things. And on behalf of so many people, we just want to say thank you for your service, for all these years. You're the KNN man, LA Story, Disciples Today. And I just was looking also, I realized that when DT Heart and Soul was started, I think the note is there were 100 marriages that have taken place through that, and 21 babies. So I know the couple that was able to help with some of the financing to get that ministry started for singles, in 2009 has just been incredible. So I just wanted to say thank you for your service for these many years. And I'm sure there's, just incredible things still to come. So thank you.
That's very, very kind, brother. Thank you. It's been really just an honor and a privilege. God has shown us way more than we asked or imagined. And I can't wait to see what's coming next, actually. But thank you for doing this. This is very, very important and valuable.
Okay. Thanks so much for your time.
All right. Love you. Bye-bye.